Thank you, everybody, for joining the Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum and Colorado State historian Duane Vandenbusche for another part of our series all about the history of the Crested Butte area. My name is Nell Burkett, and I'm the curator at the museum. The museum recognizes that we are guests here on this land, historically Ute territory. We acknowledge that the Uncompahgre Ute and the Tabawatcha Ute were forcibly removed from this area due to the Bruneau Treaty. We hope that you will take time to visit our neighbor, the Ute Museum, located in Montrose, Colorado, with exhibits developed in partnership with the Ute Tribes by History Colorado, our state historic society. While we can never do this history justice, we do include information about Paleo Indians of the Gunnison Valley, the Ute people, and the Bruneau Treaty and the Los Pinos Indian Agency in our exhibits. We hope that you will consider becoming members or making a donation to support this program and all the work we do here at the museum. You can do that by visiting our website at CrestedButteMuseum.com or by giving us a call at 970-349-1880. We are still hosting walking tours through the end of March every Saturday at 2 p.m. or private walking tours for 3 or more can be scheduled at your own convenience. This program is being recorded and will be available at CrestedButteMuseum.com and on our YouTube page. If you have questions about our programming, visit CrestedButteMuseum.com, find us on Facebook or Instagram, or sign up for our monthly newsletter. Of course, we always update the newspaper with our events and everything we're up to. Thank you to our lead sponsor, Western Colorado University Alumni Relations, as well as Bluebird Realty and Bill Petros. We will have time for questions at the end of the talk. Please post them in the chat or in the Q&A. All right, Duane.
Thank you, Nell, and welcome everybody. A couple of things before we get underway today. People have asked me when Flauschink is going to be. It's going to be on the 4th, we think. With COVID, there are all kinds of repercussions, so they're trying to get a permit on Elk Avenue, but I'll bring everybody up to date next week. Thanks to all of you who sent great emails to Pete Dunda for playing the polkas last week. Pete was very impressed, and he got a lot of emails congratulating him. Tonight, we're going to give away 2 books on Crested Butte because in all the action last week, I forgot to give one. So I'm going to give you one question right now. And whoever answers first at the end of the presentation, you can think about this during the presentation. But one of the questions is going to be, and I'm going to give you 2 of them. There were 11 ski areas in the history of the Gunnison country that had lifts. Now, 2 of them I'm going to give you because one is Monarch and one is Lake City, and they're kind of outside of the Gunnison country. So there are 9 other ones. And anybody who can come up with the most that had lifts or have lifts today, there are 9 of them. That'll be one of the questions. The other one I'll ask at the end of the session. I also want to thank our other sponsor, Kevin Sanderford, who's providing these books that I'm giving out as prizes. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the skiing history of the Gunnison country and the nearby areas. There are 457 people signed up. So it's fantastic what this Zoom can do. This is session 7 of 12. The last one's going to be on April the 15th, and we're talking primarily about Crested Butte and the nearby area. Next week, we're going to be talking about Gothic, the great city of silver wires, about 8 miles north of Crested Butte and one of the great silver camps in the Gunnison country. And if we have a little more time, we're going to work our way north up towards Crystal and Marble. So what I'd like to do is start off. I remember listening to Superman as a young kid on the radio. So I'll start off like they started with Superman. Return with me now to the days of yesteryear. Out of the mist of time comes Al Johnson, Charlie Bainey, Carl Easterly, Buddy Werner, Crosby Perry Smith, Sven Wick, and Dave Gorsuch, and all the great skiers of today who have made the Gunnison country a legendary part of the history of Colorado. Tonight, we're going to see about 80 or 85 photographs, and I'm going to comment on each one as soon as we get started here. But skiing has always been a great tradition in the Gunnison country. It was the only way of getting around early before railroads. And a lot of these mining camps never got railroads. So it's the only way you got around in the wintertime. The skis were 9 to 14 feet long. They weighed 8 pounds, 4 pounds per ski. They had a leather toe piece that you could put your mining boot in. You had a 4-inch heel block in the back, so your heel couldn't go back, but it could come up. You had a 7-foot long guide pole. And the only way of turning would be to use a telemark turn or drag that pole down and slow yourself up until hopefully you stopped. So here we go. This is photo number 1. And this is a snowshoe race. Now remember, snowshoes is what they called skis back in the old days. So these guys are on skis 9 to 14 feet long. And they're racing in 1883 on a hill near Crested Butte. Next. There are Gunnison skaters in 1884. That is the great La Vida Hotel in the background, 4.5 stories high in Gunnison, $250,000 to build, teak and mahogany, gold lace, crystal chandeliers, a peacock among mud hens, they said. Right next to it is a building that still stands today. And that building has been renovated, and that is the Edgerton House. And that is where the people without a lot of money would have to stay, like the railroaders. And then, of course, they had an ice rink right next to it, and you can see the sign that says Gunnison Skating Rink. Next. There's a picture of skiers skiing at Irwin in 1883. You can see the length of the skis. You can see the guide poles. Some of them look like they're branches off of a tree. And it was very difficult to really learn how to ski with those. And I would think that even with all the hotshot skiers we have today, you put them on skis that long and that heavy with no binding attached to your heel, it'd be pretty difficult to stand up. Next. There is the Elk Mountain house in Crested Butte on Elk Avenue. And that was located right where Donita's was and whatever it is today. Donita's is no longer. 3 stories high. And they said that that was Crested Butte's answer to the La Vida Hotel in Gunnison. Next. In 1893, they had a bad fire in Crested Butte. And they decided they would have to dynamite a couple of buildings to keep that fire from spreading. But unfortunately, they forgot that the 2 buildings they dynamited had dynamite in them. And the blast took out 4 additional buildings and drove a gaping hole through the fire hall, which, as all of you folks from Crested Butte know, still stands today. Coach Heaver's right across the street. Next. There is the Crested Butte Depot, still stands today. And the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad ran right by it. Narrow gauge railroad. Tracks 3 feet wide, as opposed to a broad gauge 4 feet 8.5. Slow train, average about 9 miles an hour, and that was in good terrain. On time, anytime, they said. Didn't want it to run over you because it was on you for so long. Next. There is the Crested Butte Ski Club, 1886. Every weekend in the wintertime, they had what they called tour races. And all the mining camps would get together at one mining camp after another. Races were held in Marble, Crystal, Gothic, Crested Butte, Tin Cup, Gunnison, Irwin, and first prize usually was $25. More about that a little later on. Next. There is a picture of the company housing for the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company in Crested Butte. And that's where the workers worked. And they worked right nearby at the big mine, and then they lived in those company houses. Next. There is Rosich's Bar, which today is the Public House Elk Avenue, 1900. And the boys are raising a glass or two, and looks like one of the guys has got a uniform on. I think he may be a firefighter. Next. There is Mr. and Mrs. Karl Bergman, right about where the golf course is today. Now you want to get a good idea of how long those skis are. You got a good shot at it. Mrs. Bergman's probably about 5.5 feet tall, and you can't even see the top of her skis. And the guide pole you can see is about 7 feet tall, maybe a little less. Next. The guy in front on the right side of the photograph, and they're skiing at Irwin in 1883, is the legendary Al Johnson, one of the greatest skiers ever in the history of the Gunnison country, and the scene of a famous race in 1886. Next. There is the Pueblo coal mine as you're working your way into Crested Butte. There were 3 coal mines on the way in, about a mile out of town on the left side of the road. You can see the railroad tracks on the right side, and there's a spur that ran right up to it. So the coal came out of the mine, down the tramway, into the tipple, and then was loaded onto Denver and Rio Grande Railroad cars. Next. There's the Crystal Snowshoe Club from the great silver town of Crystal. Didn't have any après clothes on, and that's where one of the races was held in 1886. Next. There is a little boy up Ohio Creek on a long pair of skis with a little pole, and you can tell by that picture, the dog is bored stiff, and that kid isn't going very far, or certainly not very fast. Next. A little girl named Esther, 1906 in marble, and you can see the long skis and the fact that she's not wearing any ski boots, just her regular boots that are ducked into a leather toe piece. Next. This is Animus Forks, Colorado, 1913, 10 miles north of Silverton. They had so much snow that year that the telegraph wires were covered. And you can see the tremendous amount of snow they had. This is 1913, the great town of Animus Forks. Next. This is a group of skiers in Crested Butte in 1907. And I'll read that off to the side. Ready to start snowshoeing. This is before, as I've labeled. I wish I had a picture of after. You would not have recognized them as the same party. Obviously, a very tough day on the slopes. Next. There's the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad in Crested Butte with a car in back, right by the old water tank and right near the big mine. That was taken around 1900. Next. There are the Bergmans again. This is about 1906, right near Grant Lake, and it's right near where the golf course is today. And again, you can see the length of the skis and the length of the pole. Next. Elk Avenue, Crested Butte, 1884. Elk Mountain House on the left. You can see a little water in a ditch on the right. The street obviously is all dirt, and that's a great early shot, and that's looking west towards Chocolate Peak. Next. There is as far as the Denver and Rio Grande ever ran to the north, and that is the Anthracite Coal Breaker. And up above it by 1,600 feet in a tram is Smith Hill. The locals call that Cloud City. And the Rio Grande ran a track 4 miles right to that coal breaker. So the coal came out of the mine down the tramway, which ran 1,600 feet with a 33-degree grade, the steepest in Colorado, and then was broken up into different sizes in the breaker and then loaded onto the railroad. Next. These are skiers skiing at Monarch, at the town of Monarch, which is right where the big limestone quarry is today on the east side of Monarch Pass, 1920s. Next. Western States skiers playing Crack the Whip on Quicks Hill. And Quicks Hill is about 8 miles to the south of Crested Butte. It's right where the Nikolai family is today, and it's in the shadows of Red Mountain. I would say that Crack the Whip on the playground was dangerous enough. These guys are playing Crack the Whip on skis. Next. There is Fred Brand of Grand Junction, a Western State student, 1932, coming off a jump on Quicks Hill. He is going, he told me, about 35 miles an hour. He's about 10 feet high. He's on the rise. He's got a flying helmet on. The two guys in back of him are scared as hell. And Fred Brand is scared also, but he said, you never wanted to think you were chickens, so they went off that hill. And he made it. And the guy who took that photograph had to have a great camera because he's moving at a great rate of speed. Next. There is the Pioneer Ski Area, located 3 miles up Cement Creek. There's the warming house. That house is still there today, Pioneer Guest Cabins. Next. There is the modern chairlift made by Gunnison locals during the winter of 1939 and 40 in West McDermott's garage. Now, when the ski patrol saw how high that chair was above the ground in the fall, they told all the locals, you guys got to, drop that chair because somebody falls out, they're going to get killed, about a 20-foot drop. And then a lot of snow fell. And now some of the people had their knees under their chin and they got flipped out because there was too much snow. So the Forest Service said, you got to lower those chairs. People are going to get hurt. Of course, Forest Service didn't really know much about skiing at that time. Next. There is, and I've skied it a long time ago. Everything's a fall away turn. There's Crested Butte in the background. And there you go off of the top of Pioneer. It is steep and everything is a fall away turn. Nothing is ever straight down. When I skied it, the saplings were growing up, but it was a great run. There's about 1,500 feet of vertical down to Cement Creek. Next. There is the lift, which was called Comet. And you can see the people lining up. Pioneer opened up 39 and 40, closed during the war. Last year it was opened winter of 51, 52. Then it was replaced by Rosman Hill, which opened up in that year. Next. There is Rosman Hill. And there is one of the greatest skiers who ever skied for Western, an Olympian. That is Crosby Perry Smith, coming off of Rosman Hill, which is about 5 miles south of Crested Butte and right on John Rosman's ranch today. Next. There is a guy that is, everybody knows, anybody who ever was in the Red Dolly pub, that's John Grodeski, coming aloft on Rosman Hill. I'll tell you a little story about John. When I first got to Gunnison, I didn't know anybody. I'd been hired over the phone. So I got a one-room place on South Georgia, and I went down to Gode's to have a glass of beer. And I got into Godes and I had a big picture above the bar of a ski jumper jumping around Mount Hood in Oregon. So I'll make a little conversation with the bartender. And I said, looks a little bit like the area where I'm from. He said, oh yeah, where are you from? I said, Michigan. He said, I'll be damned, I'm from Michigan. Well, I said, I'm from the Upper Peninsula. I thought that would end it. He said, I'll be damned, I'm from the Upper Peninsula. And I said, well, I'm from near a town called Escanaba. And he said, I'm from Escanaba. And it was John Grodeski. The first guy I met in Gunnison was in my home area. And John and I became great friends through the years. Next, the late, great Buddy Werner skiing at Rosman Hill. And you see, they didn't have the fancy poles. Buddy Werner later killed in an avalanche at Valseline, Switzerland. They brought him home, changed the name of the mountain from Storm Mountain to Mount Werner. Buddy Werner is the only American ever to win the Hahnenkamm downhill at Kitzbühel, Austria. Darren Rolfs won it one year, but they didn't have a lot of snow, so they only went halfway. And they always said that when you win the downhill at Kitzbühel, you'll never again buy another drink or a meal in all of Austria. And Buddy Werner won it at the age of 21 in 1958. When he went back to Europe every year, he brought back gifts that all of his friends desperately wanted. A cowboy hat. And he became known as the Steamboat Springs Cowboy, one of the legendary skiers in Colorado history. Next, hauling in an injured skier at Rosman Hill in the 1950s. Crested Butte Mountain in the background. Next, there is the slalom on Rosman Hill. All the cars are backed up to Highway 135. There's the judging stand in the middle. And many times there were cars parked along the highway as the Western States ski team hosted intercollegiate meets on Rosman Hill. Next. There is the jump. You can see the big W right where the jumper is coming off. Judging stand on the left. They had two rope tows. They ran a downhill too. And I've walked the downhill, and I guarantee you, you had to be careful because there were no straw piles on either side like there are today, and there were trees. So if you went out of control, you're going to hit trees. So you're not blasting down through there at 50 miles an hour. Next. This is the Pershing Mine Hill. And for all you hotshot locals, you see that little cement thing there in the background. That is what the locals call the Gronk, which was part of the peanut mine. And this is Pershing Mine Hill. And a little tip to the wise, it had a lift, had a rope tow and a jump. Next. Jimmy Gibson coming off of the Pershing Mine Hill jump. Some of you folks remember Johnny Somarak. He's the guy with his hands on his hip and the sunglasses on the right, 1950s. This one operated from 51 to 53 and was put in for the young people of Crested Butte. Next. This guy became a great friend of mine. This guy is Steve Krismanich. Beans was his nickname. This photo is in the Flatiron. Now, I'm telling you right now, those poles are heavy. The skis are not great. The bindings are not great. And that guy is one hell of a skier making a turn like that with that kind of equipment. Next, Pershing Mine Hill. There is Pueblo. They had a rope tow on Pueblo, which is right in back of Mountaineer Bowl on the Western State campus, lighted. City of Gunnison paid for lights, and this guy has over-rotated And I hate to see what's going to happen. Next. There is Crested Butte ski area before there was a ski area. This is 1948. And you can see the Molensic Ranch to the right. Next. Dick Eflin, one of the founders of the ski area, playing at Erickson's Steakhouse. The guy lounging down on the left is Paul Johnston. He built the ore bucket, first place really to go in at Crested Butte when the ski area opened up, right down where the Chamber of Commerce building is roughly today. And Paul went on to Vail and he built a place called the Tivoli and did very well. That's Dick's wife, Liz, on the right. She's still alive and well, living in Florida. Next. There's the Crested Butte ski area just when it opened. Warming house on the left. You see one of the gondolas going up. The gondola shack is to the right. This would be 1963. Next. There's the warming house. That shack in the background is the J-Bar shack. They had the J-Bar going up there. It's kind of like Peachtree today. This is very early. Beautiful picture of Crested Butte Mountain. Next. There is the beer stube. And the beer stube was the Molensic home in the summertime. Now, their main homes, Rudy and Matt Molensic were brothers, and they ran the ranch as a partnership. And they both had homes in Crested Butte, but during the summer, they'd come up and stay there. Now, the beer stube, when I was learning how to ski, I always liked to say that the beer was always cold, the music was always hot, and the women were very good looking. And they had a guy in there named Buck Kelly, who played the banjo. And one day, a guy named Dan Larson, about 15 years ago, came to visit me. And I said, Dan, how's Buck Kelly doing? He said, well, sad story. He died of cancer about 10 years before. But Buck Kelly went on to play the banjo all over the world. And he was a pilot that engaged in those contests where you fly around flags. And Larson brought a tear to my eye when he said, you know, Vandenbusche, Kelly always liked you, probably because you were the only faculty member who liked his music. Next. Jay Miller jumping off of one of the Molensic barns and Bobby Schweitzer on top ready to jump also. Next. There is the beer stube. Norm Simmons, Don Spickelmeyer, Bobby Knowles, and I can't remember the name of the guy on the right. Basking in the sun, spring of the year. Next. Any afternoon in the summer, about 4 o'clock in the Gunnison country. If Ben Franklin had been flying his kite, he'd have gotten a hell of a lot more than a tingle when that bolt of lightning hit that key on the edge of the kite. Next. Big winter in Crested Butte. Winter of 61, 62. Plowing snow on Maroon Avenue right next to St. Patrick's Church. Next. 4 ladies skiing at Steamboat Springs, 1920. And I want you to take a good look at that picture because, as Bob Dylan said, the times they are a-changin'. The woman on the left has got 2 poles. The 3 women on the right got 1 pole guide poles. Next. Bill Calkins is the guy in the middle. This is right where the Gunnison Airport is today. This picture is 1924, and they're out shooting rabbits. And again, you get a look at the length of the skis in Gunnison, of course. Next. Crested Butte Town Band, 1900. Now, the guy on the left was cut off, but he looked a lot like John Belushi. Next. Crested Butte Coke Ovens, 154 of them. Coking coal used in the production of steel at the CF&I Big Mine in Pueblo. Next. Now we come, ladies and gentlemen, to the greatest skier of all time in the history of the Gunnison country. This is an 18-year-old boy, graduated from Gunnison High School, 1938. His name is Carl Easterly. He is on Quicks Hill in 1938. He has built up a jump, and he is doing a backflip on skis at a time when nobody was doing backflips. Later on, Stein Erikson would do them, way ahead of his time. Next. He is now at Sun Valley, Idaho, 1946. He and his brother Verl are making a movie for an early TV program. And they're all the guys filming on the right. They're pulled by an ancient helicopter at about 50 miles an hour. Next. They do a flip over the wooden fence, and then Verl fell, and Carl is going to go across about a 50-yard wide pond on alpine skis at 50 miles an hour. Now, the first time he said that he thought there was going to be more resistance, and he fell. And he said he damn near froze to death before they could get everything dried out. Second time he makes it. Next. He makes it. Next. And now he does a flip over another wooden fence. He lived at Silverthorne later on in life, and I got a chance to know him well. And I got all the movie footage of him doing that. And whenever I showed these pictures at Flushing, I would say everybody now gives a round of applause to the best there ever was. And then I'd call Carl the next day and I'd say, Carl, you got another standing ovation. And he loved it. He died at 94, about 5 years ago. The best there ever was. Next. There's the ski train on Marshall Pass, February 13th, 1938. 405 skiers from Salida in a ski special, riding the Rio Grande to the top of Marshall Pass. 107 people coming from Gunnison Ski Club, and 122 people rode the regular train. We had a guy with an accordion playing polkas on top. People skied down to the Chavano Switch 5 miles down. Train picked them up, brought them back up for a dime. They got 3 runs. Willie the Porter was there. Count Dupuy from Belgium and Thor Groswald gave lessons. And that was a day when music, drinking, skiing, and tobogganing came together on the top of Marshall Pass. And people dreamed maybe of a ski area there or nearby. Little did they know that the following year, 1939, the WPA would lay out a ski area on the adjacent pass, Monarch Pass, which is still running today, 80 some odd years later. Next. There is the gun barrel, the steepest run at Monarch. They had a rope tow that ran halfway up, and that one's only halfway up. It goes all the way today. Well, there's no rope tow today, but you can ski the whole thing today, but not then. Next. There's a woman skiing near Monarch Pass in 1924. No ski area. Next. There's Vail Pass. Now everybody looking at this picture and say, Vandenbusche, you're out of your damn mind. What the hell you mean Vail Pass? It says Salida, 23 miles one way, Gunnison 42 the other. Here's the story. Charlie Vale was the highway commissioner. And when they built the new Monarch Pass Road in 1939, he was very arrogant and he named the pass after himself. But locals were so angry that they threw that sign into the ditch and they dropped the P off of the pass and added an S after the L. So it said Vale's ass. Vale gave up, named it Monarch as it should have been. But then he got Vale Pass named for him right near the Copper Mountain area between Copper Mountain and Vale. Next, Josh Thompson, Olympian, Biathlon, one of the greatest ever to come out of Western State. Flies for a gas company, an electric company today, Tri-State. Next, Western State ski team in the early 1950s, legendary Olympic coach Sven Wick on the left. And over Sven's right shoulder, you can see the sign, tow tickets, $1. Sven Wick, I've already said, patterned myself after him. Told him many times, Sven, want to be like you as a coach, a professor, and a person. But I said, Sven, I'm only halfway there, but I'm working on it. And I never could really equal him. One of the greatest people I ever met. 1960 Olympic coach for the United States ski team. Next. There is Chicken Ranch, 1 mile up the Slate River, where locals are skiing out of Crested Butte in 1935, building their own jumps, coming straight down. Next. That's how it was when the ski area opened. Everybody is lining up to get on the gondola, which held 3 people. And you can see them going through the door. I can still imagine it today. Next. There's the Western State ski team again, with Sven on the left, Jim Burkholder, John Matson, Jimmy Matson, Jim Balfance, one of the great jumpers, and a whole bunch of great skiers in that photograph. Next. There's the Crested Butte Ski Patrol. Look at that group. Ron Kovanik is in the middle front. He's the head of it. Eric Lamb in the right on the front. Charlie Pulsinelli, second from the right in the back. And then I hate to say it, my good friend, Jeff Schneider, right in the middle back. Just killed in an avalanche about a month ago. Go back. And then Tracy Wickland in the back. And then Ted Connors, second from the left in the back. Next. There is Frank and Gals, the greatest polka place and greatest bar Crested Butte ever had. Next. There is Frank Storica of Frank and Gals, serving people at the bar. And I was in there a lot of times, and it's one of the greatest places I was ever in. Next. January 1952. A tremendous snow year. Elk Avenue, almost all cars have been put on blocks because there's no way that the roads are ever plowed out. And the only way you get from Crested Butte to Gunnison is by rail. And when the railroad went out in 1952, then you couldn't get there. Next. That is myself, and I'm going over Copper Lake on the way over East Maroon Pass. One of the times we went over to Aspen skiing. We used to do that almost every year when I was a young man. And on a beautiful day, we're headed over. Next. There is Camp Hale, home of the 10th Mountain Ski Division, right off Tennessee Pass. $128 million to build the barracks. 14,300 men trained there. 900 died fighting in Europe. Riva Ridge is the place where they fought over in northern Italy. Today you go to Vail, number one run is Riva Ridge, because Pete Seibert and Bob Parker, two of the fathers of Vail, were in the 10th Mountain Ski Division. Next. Howellson Hill Steamboat Springs, very early. I am so enthused about what Steamboat does. I was there a couple of years ago to give a talk. Unbelievable. Lighted, kids are running GS gates. Kids are, people coming off of 30, 50, 70 meter jumps. It's no wonder a Steamboat has turned out over 100 Olympic skiers. Next. Berthoud Pass, 1930s. Next. Winter Park Ski Train, dropping people off at the West Portal after having gone through the Moffat Tunnel. They're right near Winter Park. They're going to ski Winter Park. Next. This is the top of Little Nell, 1940s, looking down at Aspen with city blocks with nothing in them. You could have bought the whole damn block for $5,000. Next. Robel Strobauer, second head of the ski school at the Crested Butte ski area. Sven Wick was first. His grandson, Aaron Blunk, is one of the great skiers in the United States. He's the guy that does the half pipes. He's won at Aspen. He's won all over the world, skied the Olympic Games. Next. Two skiers skiing Monument, which is right at the top of the Crested Butte ski area, looking down at Crested Butte ski area, 1971. Next. There is Chair 1, which I've ridden, Aspen, Colorado, early 1950s. Now you look in the background there, folks, and you can see that there's a lot of open space in Aspen. And that blanket went over your legs to keep you warm till you got towards the top. I'm so privileged to have ridden that lift. Next. There's the ski patrol for Crested Butte, left to right, Jeff Jacobson, John Burns, who's on board tonight, Mike Zaradka, Walt Fricke, George Sibley, Don Bachman, who's on board tonight, and Billy Schweitzer. 1966, I think. Next. Crested Butte School, 1880s. Look at all those great learners. Next. When I was working on my book on the Gunnison country, the big one, I would ride up with the ski patrol at 10 to 8. They'd have their meeting. And then I'd say, guys, I would like to take some photographs. Well, I don't think they ever quite got it, because you can see all of them in the background there. And Vandenbusche is getting first tracks on Phoenix Bowl, my favorite area on the mountain. And I go down and then I take photos of them, but I always got first tracks. All the memories. Next. Steve Manfredo, one of my great friends. Fredo's run at the ski area, died of pulmonary edema while coming down off Communist Peak in Russia. A Renaissance man, first of the great backcountry skiers, classical piano player, all around good fellow. Next. There's an old timers race right down Elk Avenue in the 1960s. I don't know who's in the lead, but they're not going real fast. Next. Sven Wick and his ski team going to Aspen over Conundrum Pass in the 1950s. Next. This is what the Keystone Mine tailing pond looked like before the treatment plant went in. And all of that goo went right into Coal Creek, which is the drinking supply for Crested Butte. Next. There is the ore bucket of Paul Johnston, the first one that was built, 1961-62. Next. This avalanche came down above 3 seasons and unfortunately killed a 9-year-old Texas boy in the parking lot. Today, they have got a avalanche fence up on top. This thing happened about 1986, and I remember it because I was just quitting skiing right after it came down. Next. That's the way the road looked into Crested Butte in the very early years. Very narrow dirt road coming into Crested Butte. Railroad was the way to get in. A lot of times in the spring, you couldn't get in because around Jack's cabin, it was all mud. Next. Tony Capuchin serving a drink at Tony's Tavern, now the Wooden Nickel, 1960s. Next. Bob Arnold took that picture. It is Christmas night, 1968, Crested Butte. Next. There's the gondola. That's how you put the skis and the poles in. 3 in the gondola. You can see one at the museum. A great past in Crested Butte's history. Next. The Flying Bambini brothers, upside down, holding hands, 10 skiers off a jump on the T-bar. And they landed that jump and were still holding hands. Rick Wood. G.J. Santarelli, go back to that one, Nell. Trying to think of the names. G.J. Santelli took the photograph. There are a whole bunch of great skiers in that photograph, including Rick Wood, Tony Nipa in particular. You had to be great to land that baby. Next. Father Leo McKenna blessing the gondola, January 1963. He blessed it. The gondola broke down for the rest of the day, and Father McKenna fractured his kneecap going into the parking lot. I visited him in the hospital, and I said, Father McKenna, I've been a Catholic all my life, but after this episode, I'm thinking maybe Protestant. Next. A great shot of a rainbow right over the school with Crested Butte in the background. Next. Whitey Sporsich and Kathy Wirtz, King and Queen of Flushing, 1970 or 71. Next. Rudy Sedmak, Barbara Sibley, King and Queen of Flushing. Next. Leo Klinker, Joyce Saya, King and Queen of Flushing. Next. Now that's how, these are the guys who started it. That's Chuck Wirtz on the left, Art Norris in the middle, and George Sibley next to him. And these 3 guys got together in 1969 and said the ski season shouldn't end without a celebration. And they said, we're going to flush out the old and flush in the new. And they were the original people who started Flushing. Next. Leo Klinker and Mark Ball, Christmas Day, 1968. No snow. Next. Free skiing. Crested Butte in the 1990s. Next. There is the legendary Charlie Bainey on the left, who beat Al Johnson in the great match race. Next. There is the town of Pittsburgh, located in the shadows of the head of the Slate River, 1880s, Poverty Gulch. Next. There is Sven Wick and his skiers pushing a weenie wagon not far from Winter Park when it ran out of gas. Next. There's a picture of Vandenbusche when he came to the Gunnison country down on his luck. He's about ready to go out and pan for gold. Next. There is the Devil's Punch Bowl Road. Next. There's the Western State ski team going over East Maroon Pass, 1970s. Next. Skiing on Rosman Hill, Slalom. Next. There are my two buddies, John Krismanich and Rudy Sedmak. And this is on the top of the ski area about 1978. Next. Tony's Conoco, present day museum. Next. There is the old warming house. There's Steve Manfredo, John Savoda, Freddie Heyer. Some of you might remember him. Next. Bringing the body in to bury somebody in the winter, and you're going to put them in a blockhouse and then dig the grave later on. Next. Skiing on an avalanche chute by Crystal. Next. Tower 7, Flushing celebration. Next. This is skating on Maroon Lake with the Maroon Bells in the background. Next. Crested Butte, beautiful shot. I love that with the Elk Mountains in the background. Next. That is the last shot coming up. That is January 1, 1968. I got lucky, went outside, big polka going on inside, and got lucky on the photograph. And I think that's the last one, Nell. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. Now, we're going to come back to the trivia questions with two books on the line, and Nell will tell you how to answer.
All right, so be sure to answer in the chat, although we did get a couple answers already while you were talking. Let's see here. The first one that I see came in from Kay Cook. Pershing, Rosman Hill, Pioneer, Sagebrush, Cupola Hill, CBMR, Monarch, Lake City, Marble, and Craner.
She gets the book. That's fantastic. Now let me give you the other trivia question. Everybody pay attention. I want the name, and you got to be first now. You got to be first with this one. I want the name of the greatest skier of all time in the Gunnison country who began to do flips. It's not Al Johnson. Carl Easterly, who got that first?
I see Paige Owens.
Very good. Nell will get your address. Now, ladies and gentlemen, any questions that anybody has, get on that chat board and ask away.
Let's see. All right. We got some questions in the Q&A. Oh, no, we just got a bunch of answers in the Q&A.
Okay. Good.
Did the D and RG run all winter? How did they keep the tracks clear?
Yeah, it did run all winter except to Floresta, where they had too much snow. Now they had a wedge plow, and then when you got a lot of snow, they would have a rotary, which was like a propeller that kicked the snow off the track. But yes, it did. It ran all winter to Crested Butte. And Cam Smith, congratulations on a great performance in that last race. What was the length of the old wooden skis? 9 to 14 feet.
Also, where was Rosman Hill?
Rosman Hill is on John Rosman's ranch today, and it is 5 miles south of Crested Butte on the west side of the road.
Let's see. Have you ever skied with one pole on 14-foot skis? That would have been when you were in your 20s.
Yeah, absolutely not. I wouldn't have been able to stand up.
Let's see. Next question. When did they go from one long pole to two shorter poles?
You know, that came right around the 1930s when ski areas began to open. Wolf Creek, Winter Park, Pioneer, and Monarch all opened up during the winter of 39-40. So right around that time, and even when Berthoud Pass in the middle 30s, they had poles.
Okay. Next question. Where was the hotel in the film Snowball Express located?
Well, that's good. If you ever ridden the Gold Links lift, we used to ski right by it. So when you're going down towards the East River Road that goes to Gothic, that is where they had that hotel. But it wasn't a hotel. It was all just had one frame. It looked like a hotel, but we used to ski right by it.
Next question. Jim Baker made skis for Lost Mormons in 1857. How did they survive that?
Well, they survived it very, very tough, because that was when Colonel Randolph Marcy was trying to put down the Mormon rebellion, and they were trying to get to Santa Fe, and they made it, but it was very, very difficult.
Next question. You said they skied because that was the way to get around in the winter, but did they ski for pleasure in the early days, like 1880s, turn of the century?
The only time they skied for pleasure was when they had those tour races. Otherwise, it was used as a means of getting around.
What was the controversy regarding Bo Calloway regarding the U.S. Forest Service and how it was settled?
Yeah, Doug Carlson asked that question. That controversy involved permits. And Crested Butte Ski Area, of which Bo Calloway was part owner, they had a big controversy over him getting favorable treatment from the Forest Service. And eventually, and that involved Snodgrass, and eventually Bo Calloway kind of backed out.
Next question. Was the name of the fancy hotel in Gunnison the Levita Hotel? What happened to it?
Yeah, the Levita Hotel was taken down to one story in 1943 with all of the iron used for the war effort. And then in 1998, that was torn down and made into condominiums. Too bad we don't have the railroad in the Levita today. There'd be a lot of people who'd like to stay in the Levita and ride the railroad.
When did the ski jump in Crested Butte close down?
Right after the NCAA championships in 1966. And then it was used by Grande jumpers who, even though it was falling down, they built up a jump out of wood and snow. And guys like Paul Hitchcock and Ron Barr and Ray Hensley all jumped off of that. So it was continued into the 1970s.
Let's see. Is there anything at Poverty Gulch today?
Well, yes. As you come off, it's one of my favorite mountain bike trips. When you go by Pittsburgh, the Stroh family has a cabin up there. And right by Poverty Gulch, there are a couple of cabins, and he got a Forest Service building in there also.
Kay mentions, did you know Tim Allen was in the 10th Mountain Division?
I did not know that. Wow, he's famous.
Next, when did they first do the Grand Traverse to Aspen from Crested Butte? Who was the first person to ski that route?
That I do not know. I'm sure they will tell Cameron Smith and Patrick O'Neill. The Grand Traverse, as I remember, began probably about, 15 years ago, but I don't know that. I don't want to. 1998, Cam Smith says 1998, and he ought to know because he's won it a lot of times. Thank you, Cam.
How long did it take you to get over to Aspen?
We used to stay in Gothic for the night, and we would leave about 7 in the morning, and we would usually get into, when I say get into Aspen now, we always had somebody come up and get us because there was nothing, no transportation at that time. So we get in there about 3 or 4 o'clock, depending on the conditions.
Heard there was a horse-pulled lift or sled. Was it Rosman Hill?
No, they never had anything. Now, they did have a horse-pulled sled that would take people on tours around the Crested Butte ski area, but never as a lift.
What winter sports did they do for fun in the late 19th century?
Well, drinking was one, and dancing the polka was another. The 10th Mountain Ski Division had a famous song. Their systems and theories of skiing, but one thing I surely have found, skiing's just good in the winter, but the drinking's good all year around.
Some
There
things
wasn't a whole lot
stay
you
true.
could do in the wintertime except ski and dance and, have parties.
How did they get to the top of Maroon Pass to Aspen on skis? Did they ski from Crested Butte and carry the skis up Maroon?
No, when we went up, we used skins. And a lot of times we'd ski from Crested Butte because from the stables to Gothic, you could make that in a half an hour because it's mostly downhill. And then we went right up Copper Creek and across Maroon Lake and over the pass and then down Maroon Creek.
Are there any of the pictures from tonight or any other lecture available publicly?
No, not really. Although I'm in the process of doing something like that. But it's all saved. Nell knows it's all saved. So if you want to see it again, you bet.
Yeah,
and that's only a little bit of what I have.
What is the history of Craner Hill?
Craner Hill opened up in 1966 for young people, and it was also lighted for a while because I skied it under the lights in the 60s.
When did Crested Butte switch from a mining economy to a tourist economy?
Well, when the ski area went in during the winter of 61, 62. That's when the age of coal came to an end, and that's when the age of snow began.
When did they first do, oh, we already answered that question. Was there a ski jump above the Three Seasons condo? If so, when was it taken down?
Not above the Three Seasons. Yes, above the Three Seasons condo. That was the one that was put in for the NCAAs in 1966. And then it just kind of went into ruin. And as I told you, the Grande jumpers used it after that.
And then Bill notes in the chat, remembering Johnny Grodeski's red dolly on top of the Western Motel.
Yeah, there's Karen Peterson. Wow, Karen, good to hear from you. I know your sister Susan. I've asked her about you, and she says you're doing pretty good. Any other people want on the chat board? Get on. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, while you're putting in your last questions and thank yous, big thank you to all of our sponsors, Western Colorado University Alumni Relations, Bluebird Realty, and Bill Petros. Remember, you can find the recordings of this at crestedbuttemuseum.com. Give us about a week to really get it up there. And thank you, Duane, for being here once again.
Yeah, thank you, Nell. How many do we have on board tonight?
We had over 150 tonight.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for the good wishes. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Jake. Great to hear from all of you. Megan, thank you. Dave and Julie, thank you. Kim, thank you very much. Shelley, you bet. Appreciate all your good comments. Hope to see you all on board next week for Gothic. Marianne, thanks. Janetta, thank you. Yeah, Sherry, thank you very much. All right, everybody. Vandenbusche over and out. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Nell.
Bye.